It's currently about 6 p.m. in Iran. The country's former Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi had asked protesters to gather in massive numbers at this time. And the protests are continuing to spread in Iran and have now entered their 15th day. Now, this is despite a deadly crackdown and the threat of facing the death penalty. Iran's internet blackout is now past the 60-hour mark, but visuals continue to trickle in, reportedly thanks to smuggled Starlink devices which are in the country. 2 weeks of demonstrations have posed one of the biggest challenges to the authorities who have ruled Iran since 1979. Fresh videos are coming out of Tehran and other cities likely using Starlink satellite transmitters. These show how the protests have spread far and wide. In his first remarks after 3 nights of intensified anti-regime protests in Iran, President Pezeshkian says rioters should not be allowed to disrupt Iranian society.
We ask that in every neighborhood, people come together and not let these people riot. If people have a concern, we will hear them. It is our duty to hear them and solve their problems. However, our highest duty is to not allow rioters to come and disrupt the society.
Iran's police chief says security forces have stepped up efforts to confront rioters on the streets as authorities attempt to quell the unrest that has spread across Iran since the 28th of December.
As for the police, given that we consider this level as the level of riots, we'll have a firm, fast, and sharp response to the rioters. And protesters should also know that they are being used as bait, which may result in death.
In Mashhad, the hometown of Iran's supreme leader, protesters gathered along a highway chanting slogans as fires burnt around them. The protesters were heard chanting Pahlavi will return and long live the king. The protests began in response to soaring inflation in Iran before turning against the country's clerical establishment. The government accuses the US and Israel of fomenting unrest, and this is another video which was shared on social media. It shows crowds gathered in Punak Square in Tehran. The internet blackout in Iran continues, and phone lines have also been cut off. According to the US-based human rights activist news agency, the death toll in the protests has grown to at least 192. Certain estimates even give it past 200. And over 2,600 people have been detained so far. Demonstrations are taking place globally in solidarity with the protesters in Iran. Well, in certain parts of the globe, at least. In London, a protester briefly replaced the flag of the Islamic Republic of Iran on its London embassy with a former flag which was used during the time of the Shah in Iran. The flag stayed in place for several minutes before it was removed. US President Trump said on Saturday that his country was ready to help the movement. Trump wrote on social media, Iran is looking at freedom, perhaps like never before. US stands ready to help. The message invited a sharp response from the Iranian government. Iran's parliament speaker, Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, warned that any US attack would lead to Tehran striking back. Israel and regional US military bases would be considered legitimate targets.
Know that in case of an attack on Iran, the occupied lands as well as US military bases in the region will be our legitimate targets. And with all these clear confessions that you made about invading Iran, we will not limit ourselves to a reaction. We will act based on signs of threats.
All right. To discuss this further, we're now joined by Peter Kuznick, who's a professor of history and director of the Nuclear Studies Institute at the American University. He joins us live from Washington, D.C. Professor Kuznick, always a pleasure speaking with you. Let's talk about Iran. Almost 200 deaths. Certain estimates are putting it even beyond that. An internet blackout past 60 hours, violence spreading across the country. How close are we to seeing U.S. military intervention in Iran? How close are we to an all-out war between Iran, U.S. and Israel?
We're very close on all those fronts. After Trump's quick victory in Venezuela, he's hungry for more. He's threatened Iran. He talks about the freedom of the Iranian people. It's very ironic because he's destroying democracy in the United States, and he says he wants democracy for the people in Iran. So that's not the real motive here. Israel and Netanyahu, after committing genocide in Gaza, are also urging the demonstrators on. So it's a complicated situation. We have to trace it back to 1953, when the U.S. intervened with the CIA to overthrow a very, very popular democratically elected government by Mossadegh in Iran in 1953. That the U.S. ambassador at the time said had the support of between 95 and 98% of the Iranian people. So the United States is not an honest broker in this situation. However, the people of Iran are suffering. There's very, very strong economic hardship, and they don't like the theocracy. So there's an honest democratic movement going on at the same time it's being used by international actors for bad purposes. So it's a complicated situation.
Professor Kuznick, people do not appreciate the theocracy. Let's go back to 1979. The Islamic Revolution in Iran in 1979, it overthrew the monarchy. Mohammad Reza Pahlavi was deposed. Now, decades later, we're seeing some protesters going against the theocratic government and chanting in support of the monarchy. At that time, monarchy wasn't needed. Right now, theocracy isn't needed. Some people are even asking the Shah's son, Reza Pahlavi, to return. What do you make of this? Is this the 1979 revolution in reverse?
Well, it's ironic again to think that so many people are calling for the son of the Shah to return when they hated the Shah. I mean, the Shah was so repressive with the Savak, the intelligence agencies were so repressive from 1953 to 1979, and they were very much in the pocket of the United States during that time. And now some people are calling for him to return. He lives here in the United States, right outside of Washington, apparently, and wants to regain power and influence. But that's not the answer that the Iranian people need. If they're going to overthrow the theocracy, they need a real democracy that's not tied to Israel and the United States, but represents Iranian people's own interests.
Understood. And it's not as if during the monarchy they were very happy, otherwise that revolution wouldn't have happened. If they were very happy with the theocracy, this protest would not have happened. Are these protests organic from within Iran, or is this now completely controlled from outside, in your appreciation?
It's in between. There's a lot of Mossad influence in this protest. However, people have legitimate grievances. The economy is in terrible shape. Inflation is close to 50%. People can't afford food, they can't afford schools, they can't afford housing. So there's legitimate, honest, and understandable concerns that are motivating this. But they also need to understand the way it's being manipulated by the Mossad, by the Netanyahu government, and to some extent by the United States. U.S. focus is much more right now on Latin America.
Understood.
But it's also like Greenland. It's also, right now Trump is threatening around the planet. So we're at a peculiar moment in history where we've got to take a deep breath and realize that things could unravel very, very quickly in very, very dangerous ways around the planet now.
Understood. We're almost seeming like we're on a knife's edge every day. You're just with bated breath waiting for some kind of headline. You're anticipating it already. Let's hope peace prevails at the earliest at all these spheres that you just mentioned. Thank you so much, Professor Kuznik, for joining us.
As Prime Minister Modi said, this is not a time for war.
You said it rightly, and so did he, of course. Thank you so much, Professor.
Thank you.